I spent most of my working life railing against the justice system, so it's a relatively new experience for me to be rooting for the government, for the prosecution in any way when it comes to the courtroom. And that's because since I became an attorney, I became aware of how things actually work, and that I know how much the system is stacked against the private individual. And that's one reason it's been so amusing for me to see Trumpers so enraged about some of the technical aspects of the arguments that Trump's lawyers have been vainly attempting to make, and the way they have kind of taken those things to heart, and they're pushing these issues that had long been near and dear to my heart as a defense lawyer. So let me just put that hat back on for a second and acquaint the poor Trumpers with another legal doctrine with which they may not be familiar, but with which they will be extremely upset if it comes into to play in this in the sentencing of their dear leader. And I'm not saying it will. I would be surprised if it did. But let's just talk about how the law works, and let's do that now before these guys start their next insurrection. Believe it or not, it is perfectly lawful in this country for a sentencing judge, when sentencing a convicted felon, to take into consideration all the crimes which he is alleged to have committed, whether or not he was convicted. So in other words, the judge in sentencing Trump could completely lawfully say, you know, the maximum sentence on these would be a concurrent term of 4 years. And although we wouldn't normally give that to a white-collar offender, first offender, age over 70 years old, he has been a nightmare for the country. He's committed espionage. He's stolen classified documents. He ran a fake slate of electors to try to steal the election. He called up the Georgia officials and tried to intimidate them into cooking the books for the election. He incited an insurrection against the United States, and it's been a national nightmare, and it ends here. I'm going to put him in jail for 4 years, and hopefully that's going to stop him from being elected president, and that's what I'm going to do. He could basically do that. He may not want to spell out the political aspects of it, but he could take into consideration all these crimes for which Trump has only so far been indicted and not yet convicted. This happens every day in courtrooms around the country. If it happens to you, if you commit a felony, it can happen to you. And not only that, but you can actually be acquitted of the offenses that the judge takes into consideration, and it's perfectly constitutional. That's what happened to O.J. He was acquitted of murder, and then he and some friends pushed their way into a motel room in Nevada, I believe it was, and stole back some of his sports memorabilia. That's burglary. And for that burglary, the judge gave him the maximum possible sentence of 15 years because they said he's a murderer. And of course, O.J. Simpson had never been convicted of murder. On the contrary, he had been acquitted of murder. And of course, all the conservative tough on crime people, they cheered about that. It will be interesting to see whether they cheer when the judge says, you know, he hasn't been convicted of these things, but he's been indicted. He hasn't been acquitted either. But even if he had been acquitted of inciting an insurrection and trying to steal the election and so forth, I could still take that in consideration, and I am. And so he's going to get 4 years in the penitentiary. I don't think many Trumpers are going to cheer then. I don't think this is going to affect their view of whether judges should be allowed to do that. I think they'll just say, well, in Trump's case, it shouldn't happen, and if it does happen, it's an outrage, and et cetera, and we're going to overthrow the government and whatever else they're about. But anyway, that's just a point I wanted to bring up as an old defense lawyer.